Oh, there it goes. Finally, click. I'm Resident of Collinwood, and joining me is David Mandy. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello. People at home.
Yep. Joining me is David Mandy um, to talk Dark Shadows time travel. So, how did you get into Dark Shadows, man?
Okay, so my memory is a bit blurry, but I think like a lot of people my age, I'm 23. I mean, my first exposure was the 2012 movie, which I didn't watch it, but I live in Los Angeles, so I saw the posters and stuff. And then I think a YouTuber I watched at the time who covered a lot of vampire media talked about the movie and by extension the TV show. So it was something I kind of knew existed. And then at some point or another, I must have watched a bit of it around then. And then I'm also my main thing is I'm a big Doctor Who fan, so I then really got into it with the Big Finish audio plays. Sure, like amazing. I think the very first one I listened to quite seriously was Bloodlust, which was great. And so then that, and I started reading like the Dark Shadows Every Day blog, and now every year around this time, October, I will like pick a section of the show and I will just kind of binge it for the month. It's kind of like my annual tradition.
Cool. I
Yeah.
like I like that. Have you have you ever seen the revival?
I haven't, and the impression I get is that people are very polarized on it. Some people seem to really enjoy it. Some people seem to think it's a bit of a mess.
I think it's real quick before we get on the time travel. I think for one season, like for one season, it's really interesting what they do. So it's worth watching for just it being one season. It does. It's one of those series that makes you wonder what if they got a season two. So you know, but it's that kind of series. So Dark Shadows time travel. They in the original Dark Shadows series, their first real time travel is 1795. They're doing a seance, and Vicky literally switches places with Phyllis Wick. What were your thoughts on that?
So this is one of the unusual things about getting into the show the way I did, which is that I think I have seen that episode, but my first exposure to it would have been through the Dark Shadows Every Day blog. So through the someone else's lens, so to speak, as opposed to my own. But I mean, so I can't really comment on what my like actual real time reaction to that would be. But I mean, it's kind of funny, really. Like, I mean, like not the going back in time part, but the like switching places, and then there's just this woman who's there for, from the family's perspective, maybe 5 minutes, and then the lights go out, and Vicky's back. It's amusing. Yeah.
I think one of the most interesting parts of it, like prior to them going back, prior to them taking Vicky back in time, is there's a sequence in the mausoleum with I think it's Dr. Hoffman, and she hears a woman laughing. Now they haven't I don't think they had cast Laura Parker at this point, and they hadn't gone back in time yet. But I think really that's the first real introduction of Angelique before showing her. I don't know if you've ever like heard that part of it yet. Like,
Like I said, like I jump around quite a bit. So most of what I've seen from the show in detail is the 1897 stuff. I've seen a bit of the 1795 storyline, but I haven't seen like the period between like the show changing over to color and
okay,
then them going back in time, like that section of however many episodes I'm less familiar with.
right.
So I didn't know that was a thing. Actually, it's really funny.
It when you see it, it's creepy and it's eerie. So, it's like when you hear it, it's like, ah, that ain't Sarah. It's so creepy, you know. But so they when they take Vicky back, she's standing there. She's holding the book, the Collins Family History book, and she's in her 1966, 67, I should say, clothes, and she's just standing there. And then she goes up to the old house, like it looks all brand new. It doesn't look like run down like it used to. She knocks on the door, and here comes Sarah, and here comes Barnabas. What are you wearing? What are you wearing? What did you think of that? Like their interaction?
Uh, it's just, I mean, just as an aside, like the fact that the show did this, like, there's a lot of like negative things you can say about Dark Shadows, about how it's slow, it's very hit and miss and inconsistent with the writing. But at the same time, like, no one at the time was doing something like that. That it's because it's an absolutely insane thing to do to just say, let's just completely reboot the show and go back in time and reintroduce everyone playing different characters. And I know that they had like a little like ad like insert that they played a bit before they actually started the storyline, but nonetheless, it's insane. And like again, like I can't really say what like my initial like actual real-time reaction is, but I can imagine I think I could easily put myself in the shoes of like a 15, 16-year-old or a child watching back then, and just the insanity of it. It's just, of course you're going to keep watching. What else can you do if you drop a bombshell like that? As for the interaction between Vicky and Barnabas, honestly, those early episodes where they're just kind of introducing like the new cast. I mean, it's like a soap opera and one from the '60s, so it's understandable that it's very slow, and even those episodes are moving fairly fast compared to prior ones. But it's just so agonizingly slow. I think the big issue is just that Vicky is by that point had kind of been nerfed, and is just not that proactive. To my understanding, she's a lot more proactive in like the original Phoenix storyline and stuff before Barnabas shows up. And so just to have her just kind of be there and like she recognizes everyone as people from her time, but it gets repetitious after a while, and I'm just like, this woman drives me nuts. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. She she is more proactive in the Phoenix arc. You're right. I think you brought up the advertisement, and that's a beautiful segue too, because the advertisement is you're going to learn the secret of the chain coffin. So when you see Vicky in that advertisement, the assumption is, oh, Vicky's going to learn it, but that's not the case. She doesn't. She doesn't really learn that Barnabas is a vampire. She doesn't know Barnabas is that Barnabas. She's sort of confused. She's told Barnabas is dead. You know, she's in jail. It's it's one of the best mind fucks of Dark Shadows in some sense.
Yeah, for sure. But it's I mean, it just kind of goes to show like just like I don't know what the reason was. I'm assuming it must be like a mixture of just the vampire being introduced in the show, changing up writers. The character just becomes so stupid. I hate to say that, but like it's true. She becomes very, very stupid. And even like there's a very early episode in the 70-95 arc. I can't remember which one it is. And like someone's like asking her where she came from, why is she there? And she's like, "Oh, I'm here to change things, I think." And then she doesn't do anything. She doesn't do anything. She doesn't find out anything. She gets framed for witchcraft, and then her only defense is just saying that they have to believe that she's a time traveler. Like that's going to actually help her. Um, it's funny because like you think that like switching places with the nanny that was supposed to be Sarah's governess would change things, and it seems like it probably didn't.
I think Phyllis Wicks. There's a big distinction between Phyllis Wicks, 1795, and Vicky's. With Phyllis Wick, Barnabas says that Phyllis Wick saw his coffin go to the mausoleum, meaning Phyllis Wick knew he died, at least that he died. Vicky didn't see that. She went to jail prior to that, prior to Barnabas shooting Angelique.
Sorry. Hey, I'm on a video call with someone. Give me a sec. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm living with my brother at the moment. It's a whole thing.
It's okay.
You were saying?
If you need a moment, you could take it.
Oh no, it's fine. It's fine. I'm just like, hey, shut up. No, it's fine. We're good.
No, but it's real interesting that hers is different than they're both different because Vicky goes to jail prior to Barnabas shooting Angelique and being turned into a vampire. So it's just, and that's the most fascinating part of it for me, that Vicky's journey literally does alter things in a big way. because Phyllis Wick knew.
This is true, which also kind of I didn't know that, and that kind of also suggests that Angelique probably didn't frame Phyllis Wick in the original timeline. So, so she's just so incompetent that she got framed.
I think the reason Phyllis Wick gets the heat, so to speak, the frame up that it's more Trask. Trask is Abigail and Trask are pushing for Vicky's trial mostly, and I think that's maybe where I could see the similarities where Trask, who's a complete dick, but it is Jerry Lacey's a hell of an actor, but is pushing for, instead of where it was Vicky, they would have been pushing for Phyllis Wick's trial. My only difference would be, well, Phyllis Wick was actually from Boston, so they didn't get her on, well, she's a time traveler and she's under a different name. So how she got hung really is more of a mystery than how Vicky was going to get hanged, because Vicky had nobody to defend her at all, really.
I mean, who knows? Maybe she got framed anyways, and it just took longer because she didn't show up in weird clothes with a book from the future.
Yeah.
I would imagine that would kind of make people paranoid. Maybe it just took them longer for that reason.
I think the biggest thing with Vicky is, at the time, Victoria Alexander's character and the way she portrayed it, she's the biggest, and I'm going to use a wrestling term, baby face. She's the biggest good guy there is at that time. Barnabas isn't quite there yet. So they're sort of using her, in my opinion, to turn him babyface. He's defending her. He's sticking up for her. He's fighting for his family. There's a lot of things going on with Barnabas that I think are key to 1795, where when we come back, he's going to be, to normal time, he's going to be the baby face.
Well, I mean, yes and no. I mean, like, you kind of look at some of his actions even afterwards, and I mean, they're not exactly justified, are they? Doesn't he try to kill Maggie at some point to take her head for the Bride of Frankenstein?
He actually tries to kill Jeff Clark.
Okay,
He tries to kill Jeff Clark, right? So there are some questionable decisions by our potential hero Barnabas, for sure.
Yeah, but I mean, nonetheless, they did, like, there's an attempt there to make him sympathetic nonetheless, and to shift the show's framework so it's about him. And because, like, because the thing about, like, having the big bad vampire suddenly become the most popular character is that you need to keep him around if you want to keep people watching, but you've also introduced him as this horrible villain who's, like, attacked people and is brainwashing people and kidnapping them and so on. And so you just kind of have to, they did what they had to, and it's a bit awkward if you think about, like, it as from, like, a modern, like, TV writing perspective. But I mean, soap operas, to my understanding, are like that in general, just a little bit off.
Right. I think the one thing I've always been asked, do you forgive Barnabas for kidnapping Maggie? And I'm like, sure, it's just a kidnapping. It's no big deal.
Yeah, no, I mean, who cares? I mean, she almost lost her identity and he was going to kill her, but, you know, it's fine. It's fine.
It's forgivable, sure.
Yeah.
It was sort of like equivalent exchange, instead of where Barnabas said, I'll pay you, Sam Evans, to paint my portrait. In the process, I'm going to kidnap your daughter. It's all good.
No wonder the commission on that painting was so high.
That's right. There you go. I like that.
Oh yeah, but no, it just, geez, and, like, but yeah, I mean, and the time travel storylines, I mean, it's brilliant. Like, I love, like, just for one thing, like, it means that they can essentially reboot the show every, like, 7 or 8 or 9 months or every year or so, which they kind of had to do because by the time the Barnabas character had been introduced, they kind of all, like, the modern day characters kind of lost their bite. There was not really a lot of tension in the family, and so going back in time and creating a new set of characters just makes sense, and letting all the actors get to play new people is just fun, really.
Yeah. It was really interesting because Lewis said everybody pretty much who was dressed up in the costume is who they are. Joshua is Lewis Edmonds. Naomi is Elizabeth. It's Millicent is Carolyn, and it's now the only difference is, well, Vicky's not Josette, but Maggie is Catherine Lee Scott, but and Jeremiah is Burke, even though they kill. I gotta ask something: is Burke Devlin dead?
I'm trying to remember. I think he comes back in some of the audio dramas, which I do count as canon. So
Okay.
I guess he's alive. I mean, I guess planes can like crash in South America and you can still survive.
I have this working fan theory that I pitched to a friend of mine that secretly Burke Devlin is actually the Phantom, the guy in the purple leotard, and just no one knows it.
He had to fake his death to make sure to protect them.
Right. What were your thoughts on Angelique, Laura Parker's witch character?
Oh, Angelique is such an interesting character because, well, there's not a whole lot to her, at least initially, because she's very much just the standard like soap opera vixen. She's out to steal a man, yada yada yada, and she's nuts. None of that's like especially groundbreaking on its surface. But A, making her a witch, and B, casting Laura Parker to play her just kind of elevates what could otherwise be like a really tired cliche. I love Angelique. I really, it's a brilliant character, and I remember watching part of the 1897 storyline with a friend of mine who actually has a PhD in Gothic literature, and we got to the episode where Angelique meets some character, and she does her doll trick, where she chokes the doll, and he was loving that because it's a badass move. Like she does it like multiple times throughout the series, and like it never gets old. It's fun.
I love the fact that Laura Parker is sitting there having these cards. She's holding the candle, she's lighting it, and she's doing a spell that causes Vicky to run out of the old house and right into Traska's arms. I'm like, damn, that was good. What were your thoughts on that?
I mean, this is again just the absolute just the fact that the show was made the way it was in the time it was.
Yeah,
it's just bonkers because like I'm sure anyone who's listening to this knows they could next never do second takes.
right.
So constructing a house of cards and then setting it on fire for a scene that lasted several minutes, if I'm remembering correctly, it's insane. It's absolutely insane. You don't do that. Which is not like a criticism on my part. I really appreciate the fact that they did that. It just shows how like out there and like how much they really like the people making the show were really trying. They were like, there's a lot you can like negative stuff you can say about Dark Shadows, as I said, but like the amount of effort being put in is noticeable, especially if you compare it to other soap operas at the time, to my understanding, where like you don't get, for one thing, you're not going to get a witch casting a spell with the House of Cards, but you're also not going to get the kind of fun camera angles and things like that the show used very often. Yeah.
Right, and they're here's the thing too with 1795, they're really pulling out other effects too, because when Barnabas gets turned into a vampire after he dies and comes back, he goes on what I call the Reverend Trask Revenge Tour. He's like torturing him. He puts a dead prostitute in his room. It's beautiful.
It is. God, fuck the Trasks.
Yeah, it's like, and I love how Forbes. What were your thoughts on Forbes? Is like, there's a dead girl.
I don't even remember that bit, to be honest. I don't remember that part. There's just so much to remember. But I mean, like, I'm not even gonna I'll just take you at your word because it definitely sounds like something that would happen. It's like it sounds about right. I mean, Barnabas is a petty bitch. He is. He's a horrible, murderous, petty bitch. That's what he is.
But we love him for it.
We
right?
love him for it. I mean, yeah, you go, girl. But but no, he's. Oh god, yeah, but yeah, Barnabas is like he's a horrible person, and especially once he's a vampire. I mean, it's not surprising. It is really interesting though, just seeing it in action though. Just
Right.
and it's like, this is our main character. This is who we're meant to be rooting for. Oh, okay, well, just go along with this, I guess.
What did you think of 1897? I know you wanted to talk about that too.
So this is a part which I've watched pretty much all of it. I think I got towards the end, once you're in the part where like it's very clear that they've extended the storyline past what was the intended ending point, because it's popular and it's just kind of characters wandering around for a bit. So the later Hand of Patopi stuff, essentially. So I'm very familiar with it. I mean, it's great. I love it so much. I mean, it's a bit uncomfortable, just with like Grayson Hall and Brownface being like a quote unquote someone Romani and all that stuff. But I mean, other than that, I mean, it's brilliant. Just I think it also works because like we have a much more proactive protagonist going back in time now who will actually get involved.
Yeah.
It's also the era where it becomes very clear that there is no consistency to how the time travel works whatsoever. There's a bit where, like very early on, when Quentin dies from something, I don't remember what. This is before he becomes a zombie. And Barnabas is like, "Oh shit! Wait, I changed the timeline. This is bad. What did you come back to do? Wasn't that like explicitly what you said you were going to do?"
Right. Barnabas pretty much goes back to 1897 and makes things way worse. But it's weird because Jenny, Quentin's wife, kills him in what we all call Matthew Morgan's cottage, which was Laura's cottage in the Phoenix Arc. But she kills him and stabs him, and I'm like, oh no.
I forgot that happened. I must have been like that. That must have been the part. That was around the point where I must have started. Did I start watching with my friend at that point? No, because by the time I started watching with my friend who's got the PhD, we've gotten past the Jenny stuff, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, I forgot about that. That's one of the really fun things about 1897. It's a lot less tight than the 1795 arc is, where they're like, okay, we have all these beats we have to hit. Let's get it through. We're there for about, I'm going to do some quick math, like 13, 14 weeks, so a few months, and then head back home. 1897, there's like multiple subplots going on. There's like the return of Laura. There's like the 1 week where Quentin is a zombie. There's, I'm sure, a lot of other stuff I'm not even thinking of right now. And some of it kind of feels like they're just kind of, it eventually reaches a point, at least for me, where it starts to feel like they're just doing really random stuff. But there's a period for a good chunk of it where it's just exciting and it's absolutely bonkers and doesn't totally make sense, but everyone's like firing on all cylinders and the costume's great, the melodrama's great, and like you're just having a good time. I love the 1897 arc. It's wonderful, and Quentin is just amazing.
I love you have Grayson Hall playing Magda, the gypsy. You have Jenny, who's her sister, and Magda does not know about the kids. She doesn't know that Jenny had kids. And it's so like holy shit. Like, we all know, like, by this time, the Collins family's full of secrets. But it's like, how can you not tell these people there's kids?
I mean, surprise. I mean, it's like, and it's great, especially in those early, like the first several months of the 1897 storyline, where they actually, before they start to really seriously deviate from the plan, there's so much stuff that's like very clearly like foreshadowed and then paid off. So there's mentions of like Beth going to meet some family in the village, all that kind of stuff. It's great. And I mean, like, Jenny being Magda's sister makes, I feel like it sounds like I'm being really hard on the show when I say this stuff. And I want to be clear to everyone listening. I am not trying, I'm just stating this as fact. I still love the show. But like Jenny being Magda's sister doesn't really make a lot of sense. But like, I can kind of forgive it because it's like, well, no, that makes no sense. But also like, holy shit, that opens up a bunch of new story possibilities. So I'll forgive it because, yeah, why not? Let's go with it.
Well, here's the thing too. Quentin, another friend of mine, brought this up, Patrick McRae. Huge shout out to him. Quentin has been with so many women by this point. He runs away with Laura. He comes back. It's like Quentin's been with so many women, yet he only has 2 kids to 1 woman. It's like, really? Really?
I mean, we don't know. I mean, he was wandering around the earth for like 80 years or something like that. Not 80, like 72 years. Somewhere in the 70 to 80 year range.
Right.
And I'm sure, I mean, like, you get bored if you're immortal, I'm sure. I mean, I'm sure he has more kids and he just doesn't know about it. Just kind of forgot. He forgot. Okay, it happens to everyone.
You have Thayer David playing Sandor, and thank God they kill Sandor because he gets to play Count Andreas Patofe.
Oh, yes.
What were your thoughts on that character?
Tofi is... So, side note, I do need to point out that there's a lot of heavy coding in, because I'm a gay man, there's a lot of heavy coding with him and his servant, which suggests they might be queer, which I think is delightful. If you know what you're looking for, and if you know some of the, if you know some of like the coded language that would be used both in the 1890s and in the early 60s, there's a lot there to suggest it, which I appreciate that. I mean, like, evil gay man is problematic, but I don't care enough to be mad about it. It's an old TV show. But Patofi himself is just fun. Like, you got Thayer David in this ridiculous costume that's like these like crazy Elton John glasses and this insane like curly wig, doing, I think, an accent. It's been a while, and it's just fun.
I like how when Aristide's laying on the ground after he's been somewhat seduced by Angelique and rendered unconscious, Patofi just comes up and sort of kicks him like, Aristide, like, he's kicking, like, he just kicks him. Like, wow.
God.
Right. But do you think that Patofi was afraid of the gypsies?
I mean, I seem to recall that's definitely canonical. At least that's certainly how the audio plays, and the Finnish have certainly played things.
Right.
It's been a while since, because I would have, last time I watched anything from the 1897 storyline, it would have been not last October, but the one right before that. Because last October I watched like a smattering of episodes from like, I think 1967, like the Adam and Eve era.
Yeah.
None of the early Barnabas stuff now at the moment, if anyone's curious. Cares about going in order. I don't, apparently. Also, in my defense, the 1967 stuff was getting a bit boring, so I just was like, okay, I'll just watch like a really truncated version of the early Barnabas stuff, because, Dracula's fun.
Right.
I'm getting off topic here, aren't I?
Listen, I don't really have some rules for this channel. I forgot to tell you, I'm all good with like no rules. If you want to go off topic with Dark Shadows and discuss other plot lines, I'm good, man.
Cool. I just want to be sure, because I mean, like, I have like heavy ADHD brain. This is just how my brain goes. But yeah, the time, but like getting back to Patofi, like there's somewhere around that point, not immediately when he's introduced, but soon after that is where I'm like, okay, it becomes very clear, at least to me, that like, okay, you're extending the storyline past what was originally intended, because you've killed off like several family members. There's not a whole lot left going on. Most of the characters you're following now are brand new ones. What happened here? And eventually, I think that was when I was watching with the PhD friend I mentioned earlier. Eventually, we just kind of lost steam with it, and it's fine. I'll go back and finish it eventually, but like, I think I'd rather just go back to the start, because there's just so much good stuff at the start. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of things with like Reverend Trask too, when he comes into the play, like before Patofi does. I love how Patofi, before he gets the hand back, he goes up, he gives David a kiss on the cheek, and basically Patofi has possessed every person in that house without the power of the hand. I love how Patofi, he doesn't need the hand to have power, but he wants it because it's his. And it's evil as hell.
What happened to the Patofi hand, like at the end of the storyline? Because the box is just like a random prop they had in their warehouse or whatever, which so you can see it in previous episodes. What happens to the hand itself once the storyline ends? Because I don't actually remember. I know based off of like Big Finish stuff, it doesn't get destroyed. So does that mean that like it was just sitting in a box in Collinwood for like 70, 80 years and no one opened it?
I think the hand, if Patofe's dead, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we know the hand can survive without him because it was detached from him from how many years.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the hand is literally just out there somewhere. I don't
Right.
know. I don't know if Patofe's out there, but his hand certainly is.
Okay, yeah, and I see that does seem, I think, fit with some of what I'm remembering from the audio plays, because I've, at least with Bloodlust, it does. Yeah, if you're watching or listening to this and you haven't listened to Bloodlust, I highly recommend you do. It's brilliant. But yeah. So yeah, 1897. That just overall, it's a lot of fun. Of course, we get Quentin, who, I mean, everyone loves Quentin. He's just fun. Like, I mean, just, oh god, how on earth am I forgetting the actor's name who plays him?
David Selby.
Thank you. I'm gonna kick myself now.
No, you're fine.
Yeah, I'm kidding. But yeah, he's just fun, and like they also just kind of lucked out because they got both him and the woman who plays Beth, Terry Crawford, to play ghosts, and like it's very clear that like okay, you could, and like once they actually have Terry Crawford start to act, it becomes very clear that the reason they cast her in the first place was to play a ghost who's tall and imposing and doesn't talk.
Right.
And it's just the Quentin Beth romance is just so dry. It's not like I can't get involved in it.
I think with Quentin, the reason it's like somewhat hard with him and Terry Crawford's Beth, it's not so much the actors or the writing. Quentin has so many women.
Well, that's the thing too. Like Beth as a character is just like, so the woman who you love is just this lady who works in your house. Who, like, I mean, I've watched almost the entirety of the 1897 storyline. I don't think I could mention a single thing about her besides her being a servant and frowning a lot.
There's a lot of weight on that character's shoulders too, with Jenny and stuff. That's the thing too. Like, you're more feeling sorry for her because she's sort of bared with this burden of dealing with Jenny, and like Quentin comes back and that complicates things even further for her to have to keep an eye on Jenny.
Oh yeah.
You know, it's like I love David Selby's performance. I'm with you. Like he's amazing. He's charming, but he's one of the biggest, like from a character standpoint, like charming bastard.
He is, like, again, PhD friend. We were watching, and like after like 2 or 3 episodes, my friend was like, "Oh yeah, I have a crush on Quentin Collins. This is exactly the kind of guy I love." And it turns out, like, oh, lo and behold, like, I mean, this is a slightly different kind of art. This is a slightly different kind of character, but like, oh, he was really into Angel when he was watching Buffy as a kid. So like, it's like very different character, but you know, there's similar vibes.
Right, because with Quentin, he talks the way he talks. It's very smooth. He laughs. But underneath that, all that charmish, boyish charm mannerisms, there's a violent man under there too.
Yeah, it's just, but like, you know, it's a less extreme version of what happened with Barnabas, where eventually they were like, oh, this character is really popular. Not only is he popular, but he's also like becoming kind of a heartthrob. So we have to like course correct and make him good again. So we can't have him threaten to strangle his grandmother on her deathbed.
Right.
So we just have to, like, you know, slide that under the bed and not think about it, as the one is wont to do. What are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about. What grandmother? She doesn't exist. I mean, according to another one of the storylines, she can't exist. Speaking of Terry Crawford.
I always joke, well, who hasn't wanted to strangle their grandmother? Hey.
Yeah. Yeah, and like, that's actually one of the odd things. It's funny. I was looking at the a version of the Collins family tree earlier today for whatever reason, because I was trying to remember it, and maybe Big Finish has filled in some of these blanks. But there's this really odd thing because of how the time travel storylines happened. We don't quite know how like we know we can trace like the 1960s family to the 1897 family to the 1840 family, and I think that you can connect it further than that, but we don't quite know how they're connected to Barnabas's immediate family, if I'm remembering correctly. Presumably, like, well, actually Millicent went crazy, so they can't be descended from her. There's like there's like a whole branch of the family which our modern day characters are from, which we know nothing about because, I mean, you know, soap opera, they weren't thinking about it, but it's very funny if you look at a family tree and you're like, oh, there's just this huge chunk of it that's blank.
Yeah. I think it would be fun, like, if the new series gets picked up, like, to sort of go back and to see, like, the descendants and how they came to be a bit, like, we know Isaac and stuff, but how, like, who were their kids? Who was, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you could totally do, like, a generational, like, epic story just about the Collins family. You just have to very loosely adapt stuff from the original show and be willing to, like, do your own thing, as long as you just keep the same vibes, I'd say. Which I'd be fine with. Like, I mean, it wouldn't be exactly the same, but, like, adapting, like, remaking the show again would be really, really hard. I don't think impossible, but it'd be very hard.
What did you think of Reverend Trask, the Gregory Trask, I should say?
Well, I mean, he's a great villain, honestly. Like, he's awful, and I hate him, and there's all sorts of reasons to hate him, and that's why he's great.
Yeah. Jerry Lacey knows how to play a heel. I've always, like, with the 1795 Trask, like, the way he looked, and I don't know if you're familiar with this pulp character, but I am. Solomon Kane. He looked like he was dressed almost like Solomon Kane, you know, a bit. But
where'd you find it?
It was on the floor. I'm gonna put it on the.
Where on the floor?
Like.
Okay. Well, thanks.
See you.
Sorry, that was my brother. He found the TV remote. It's been missing for 2 days.
I've had mine missing for 3 days. I'm with you. I've had that happen. But yeah, the way they have the 1795 sort of dressed with the hat, but he sort of dressed like Solomon Kane to a degree. But with Gregory Trask, no, he's got the long sideburns. He's very 18th century, and I love how, even though it's Trask, he's playing a completely different look and character to a degree.
Oh, there's a very big difference between 1795 Trask and 1897 Trask, and that one of them is very. I think that 1795 Trask actually believes in the stuff he's saying.
Yep.
And I believe that Trask is just, like, 1897 Trask is just a self-absorbed, horrible, narcissistic man who hates women and probably is so deluded he probably doesn't even realize how much of a hypocrite he is. So but I don't believe if you were to dig past that he actually believes in God or any of the shit he says. No. Original Trask, 1795 Trask, is, well, for one thing, a man out of time who's still hunting for witches 100 years after too late. But he actually believes in what he's saying, I think. So.
Yeah. I'm going to ask this: if you could take any fictional character from a pre-existing franchise and put them in Dark Shadows, who would you put in there?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Okay, so it's a really interesting question. I'm not sure. I can answer like I know if I were to do something similar to Dark Shadows, where I was adapting Gothic novels and stories and I was, like, mishmashing them together. I know some of the ones I'd pick, but I don't know about, like, just taking a character wholesale from one thing and sticking them in Dark Shadows. See, the thing is that, like, my two current big obsessions are Doctor Who and X-Men, and none of those characters really fit with Dark Shadows. So, I may have to pass on that question.
Well, see, here's what I mean. Like, my characters would be either the Shadow from the pulps, Solomon Kane, or one of my favorite slashers ever, my all-time favorite slasher, I would put Michael Myers.
You have to did a serial killer, at least like in a slasher serial killer, I should say. Which, I mean, I'm kind of fine. I'm not really into slasher films. But yeah, there. I know that like if I were to adapt stuff, like do like another like a revival where I had to like where I had to do something similar, where I was just taking like inspirations and creating new stories. I'd probably like do like some weird combination of like Flowers in the Attic and like Wyland, if you've heard of it. It's like a really old. It's one of the first American Gothic books.
I've never heard of it.
It's written by the same guy who popularized the haunted Indian burial ground trope. It's very, and ventriloquism is like a big plot point in it. That has changed, but like this guy's just kind of fucking with his family and thinking that they're hearing angels or something. I don't exactly remember the exact details of it, but it was a good book. I read it for English class.
Cool.
Yeah, so I think Flowers in the Attic would be fun. I don't think it'd be as incesty as that book ended up being, but I think like just the idea of hiding children in some part of Collinwood and all that stuff would be fun.
Man, I would love to see like Lamont Cranston come into Collinsport and what his agents tell him like weird stuff's going on. He just goes invisible and clouds people's mind and starts just fucking with people who are doing wrong. But Dark Shadows is a lot of fun to like mesh people, like mesh characters, But sorry, I'm getting off topic too. 1897. What did you think of Julia goes back to 1897 and somewhat is trying to, I don't know, save Barnabas, but she's sort of playing amnesia with Gregory or not Gregory, but Edward.
Just the absolute bonkersness of that. So first of all, I just need to point out, this is not like a new observation. Everyone who's watched this knows this. But the episode after she time travels, where she shows up in front of Collinwood, it's like the dialogue and the way how they're talking about it, it's like she just had a really bad drug trip. That's how all of a sudden, like, time travel is no longer walking through like a symbolic door in your mind. It's just doing LSD and seeing weird shapes and colors, and then all of a sudden it's the 1890s and you have amnesia.
Right.
But yeah, so that, and then like it's been so long. There's like a really weird plot point too, where like someone shoots her and it doesn't hurt her for some reason. Is that right? Am I remembering that right?
Yeah. What is weird about it is you're bringing up a great point. She did not have a physical body to go back to like Barnabas did. So when it hits her astral body, it's more just a spiritual self than actual sort of a physical manifestation. That's why she's only there for a short time period, and then she goes back. She disappears.
There's also like the weird fact that Magda's around at the same time, and I think she just kind of disappears while Julia's there, which means that the two characters hypothetically could have met. Not that they could have done that on screen, but And it's funny actually that Magda survives now that I think about it, because she actually, I'm pretty sure, does survive the storyline. And yes, she does, because again, Big Finish, a different audio they did mentions that one of the characters gets sent back in time and ends up living with her for a bit. It's a whole thing. But yeah, it's fun. And I mean, Julia is great. I mean, who doesn't love Grayson Hall? Like, I know that I was there. I did mention that I'm naturally very uncomfortable with her doing literal brownface to play Magda, to play like an ethnic character, but like at the same time, like, you can't fault her performance, even if it's very, very racist, because it's brilliant. It's a brilliant yet racist performance.
Grayson Hall's an amazing actress.
Oh yeah.
I love the fact that I love how the gypsies, Edward Collins at times is very ignorant, and he doesn't think the gypsies have any sort of rules or laws. But we learn different because King Johnny Romano puts Magda on trial.
Yeah.
And that's one of my favorite sequences of 1897.
Oh, that's a great sequence, yeah, with all like the ghosts showing up to chase her and all that. It's great. And like there's a bit where like they're closing in on her where you can see a bit of the studio floor, but who cares? You're not looking at that unless you know to look for it. Yeah, and like, which is the whole like the Romani I'm just going to use that because I'm not totally comfortable using the word that they use. Like existing as they do in Dark Shadows is so weird to me for the simple fact that like in this universe, I guess like Romani travelers emigrated to America and just kind of kept their culture wholesale and didn't integrate didn't integrate, which I mean, not totally unsurprising, but it's so strange because it's like, this is America. And not that Romani people don't exist in America, but they certainly don't exist in traveling caravans.
Right.
All this other stuff.
See, I have a little theory about the whole Johnny Romano thing. I think Johnny Romano... Have you seen The Princess Bride?
I have.
Okay, so in my opinion, and I want to stress that for people watching, Johnny Romano, if one Johnny Romano dies, another takes his place. Honestly.
Like the same name,
right.
Everything?
Yeah. Yeah. In some sort of either name or the fact that when Johnny Romano dies, when there's a Johnny Romano and he dies, the spirit of Johnny Romano goes into another gypsy. Because
I see.
You see, like, there's some weird stuff going on with the gypsies, like, where, because they have the power to turn Quentin into a werewolf, they have the power to take, like, lop off Patafi's hand and make him fear them. So, my question is, like, to anybody really, has always been, why is Patafi so afraid of him? Because they have this other power, this other world power, maybe to reincarnate themselves.
I think it's most likely that Patafi, like the impression of what I remember from Patafi, is he's just a regular warlock.
Right.
A very, very powerful warlock who has a lot going on, but like still a powerful warlock. And there's this vague idea, and it's like I'm sorry I keep bringing this up. I'm sure someone's going to complain about it, but there's certainly this vague idea of like ethnicness being like magical and mysterious, and especially when it comes to like Romani people and them being connected to some sort of mysticism. So I think it kind of ties into that, into like, the whole idea of like, oh, they're all into tarot cards and crystal balls, so they must be like inherently magical. And I guess if you want to go off of that logic, which is not good logic, I want to stress that again. But if you're going off of that logic, then yeah, it makes sense for just a regular guy who's just studied this to be more afraid.
Right. Well, there is such a thing as, and here's sort of like a concept with where X-Men sort of, there's normal people and there's people with power, right? There's humans like you or I, but then there's people who have magical powers who we might not know about, and they keep silent for certain reasons. And maybe that's just the entire Romano clan, so to speak, or the gypsies in general. And then there's people like Patafi who have power.
Yes. I'm trying to remember, like, can't remember if Angelique is more powerful than Patafi or not. There's a thing in the audio plays where they essentially imply that she's equally as powerful. Right. But I mean, that's not from the original TV show, so I can't really state that as being official. It's just, yeah. Yeah, he sure is a guy.
Yeah.
He's a fun character, and Thayer David and like that ridiculous getup is just it's just brilliant. Like, I don't even care that, like, I mean, I wouldn't care about this anyways, but I don't even care that like no one back then would be wearing glasses like the ones he's wearing. They're very obviously modern to like 1969 or 1970, whatever year it was. Like, they look great. It's great. And like, honestly, I think the first time I watched it, it took me a little while before I realized that was Thayer David, because I guess I just didn't watch the credits to see who played him. I was like, oh wow, wait, that's the guy who played Sandor and Ben and a character from a part of the show I've never watched. One of these days I'll check out the early stuff. I just don't really want to. There's no one's really done like a episode to episode recap like Dark Shadows every day is done for everything else. So I can't really selectively pick and choose while I'm watching for that, which is what I'm doing for the early Barnabas steps. Last year I read through the blog and I made notes of what episodes I thought were worth watching, and I'm just kind of going off of those numbers. And even so, like, there's still a lot of repetition. I can't imagine what it's like in the early days.
Well, I sort of do. I did videos of Dark Shadows at the beginning, Vicky coming to Collinsport a bit and getting into what was happened and stuff on my channel. But I think that really Dark Shadows, as much as like anybody can explain it to any like one person, it's best viewed for your own eyes. You know what I mean? Like that's the best way I can describe Dark Shadows. Like I could sit here and describe it like all the time to anybody, but the one thing I will say, hey, go check it out because your own eyes are more important than mine.
It's hard to recommend it though, just because like so much. There are parts of the show where just nothing happens, or where it's just really slow, especially in the early days, and then later it just becomes a little bit too crazy, in my opinion. But I'm digressing again. I think if you are going to recommend it, like I always think it's important to remember the context of the show, because the context and the format of the show and the time it was made are kind of important, and they do affect how the show got made. And I don't just mean stuff like, oh, they only had like 3 weeks of story plans at any given time, and although that's important too, and like, oh, they could only afford like 4 actors, or not 4, like I think it's 6 actors in each episode and stuff like that. No, it's important to also remember that that it was a daily soap opera before TiVo was a thing, before streaming was a thing, before you could record stuff to videotape. So a show that's airing 5 episodes a week, especially under those conditions, for one thing, there's just going to be problems, for one thing. But also from a writing perspective, things are going to move slow. They're going to move really, really slow. There's going to be a lot of scenes of people talking about things and then talking about other people talking about them, and on and on. And eventually they just kind of stop doing that. There's a certain point around, like a little bit before the 1897 storyline, I'd say, where they just kind of stop doing that. But for a period, that's just what they do, and that's annoying. But also, like, you can't entirely blame them either. Like, they weren't like a massive hit at that point. They didn't know how frequently people were watching. You had to like let people know that stuff happened.
There's a point too in the beginning episodes where Vicky's trying to question the Collins family about her lineage, and there's a portrait that looks exactly like Alexandra, and that Sam Evans had painted about a woman named Betty Hanskell, I believe, and Vicky shows it to Roger and Elizabeth, and they say, "Oh, that looks nothing like you," and it turns it to Carolyn, and Carolyn goes, "Hey, Vic, when did you get the portrait done?" And they don't address it afterwards.
Well, that's the thing. Like Victoria Winters' lineage just kind of gets dropped as a plot point after a certain point, because the vampire just ended up being more fun. For better or for worse. Like, I'm not super attached to the Victoria Winters character. I kind of glean from what little I've seen online that a lot of Dark Shadows fans are. And I do think that like her being like the original main character does have some sort of like mythic weight to it in the series lore. But as a character in a literal TV show, she doesn't interest me. So I can't personally say I'm sad that was dropped, other than it's kind of funny that it was.
It's interesting because like Vicky's my favorite character all time. Like I love Alexandra.
So I've been very engaged with her for the past.
Listen. You're allowed. Listen, I've always said to people, you're allowed to have your own opinions on here. I bring, you know what I mean. I'm not gonna sit here and go, "Oh, damn him." No, no. But I think Alexander, what they do well is with Alexander is, and what she does well is, she's trying to piece things together for herself. They call it, many people call it dumbed down, but what I view it as, there's Vicky at times not necessarily realizes everything going on her, but she's trying to piece everything together at times. It feels like the way Alexander sort of moves her eyes and her face, not necessarily her words, but her facial features at times, to me, in my opinion.
There's certainly a bit, like I definitely noticed this in the past few episodes of the early Barnabas days where I was watching it and I was like, I can't prove this for certain, but I was like, okay, I don't know this for certain. I know they didn't do this, but I'm pretty sure that they're setting that at some point they decided to set Vicky up as like this narrative's equivalent to Nina Harker in the book. And if you haven't read the book, those watching, Nina Harker, she does get bitten by Dracula, but she's much smarter than Lucy, who actually dies at his hand. And she's much smarter. She becomes very integral to hunting him down. All this stuff. She's one of those characters where like if she wasn't in a book written in the 1890s, she'd be like the kick-ass main character. But she's a woman, so she has to be kind of victimized. But she still manages to be badass while doing it. And there's a bit where like like she's like piecing stuff. Vicky is, I should say, is like slowly starting to piece stuff together. She's like, oh, like something about like, it's like, oh, like Maggie was experiencing all these strange symptoms, which are just like what Willie was experiencing, and isn't that interesting? And it's like, okay, I feel like that's where you're going, and then like it gets dropped. My headcanon is that somehow Josette's music box somehow made her dumber.
Yeah.
So,
I think, right, you're making a great point that there's things she brings up that when David sort of is starting to act strange and Barnabas is sort of torturing him and dismissive of it to everybody, Vicky brings up David's mother.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of like you said, she seems like she's trying to piece things together. But then again, she's also getting seduced by Josette's music box. So again, there's just a lot of things going on, not just with her, but with everybody else too. Yeah. Carolyn, I think, was bitten by that point. So she's sort of...
Vicky listening to the music box predates Carolyn by quite a bit. Like, it happens before they go to color. And it's that point where she starts having like this really weird fixation with the past.
Yeah.
Quotations. Whatever that means. It's very vague. And which is fine. Like, I understand like being interested in history and things from the past, but it's talked about in such a way as if it's like a singular place or something.
Right.
It gets very odd after a little while.
Well, she's fascinated with the past or obsessed with it because she doesn't know her own. And I think that with her, it's, and this is such a key line by Joan Bennett Elizabeth, where she goes, you're going to learn that, okay, you want to learn about the past, you're going to realize it's not as romantic as you think. It was dangerous. And that's a great line by her. That's like, holy shit.
I mean, I'm sure Vicky learned that firsthand after she was hung. Womp womp.
The rope burn around the neck, man.
If I was more invested in the character, I'd be so mad about that. And like, I think it's kind of horrifying, but at the same time, like, oh my god, they wrote off their character in a way that's just, frankly, kind of mean. Like, I don't like the character. I think after a point she gets very repetitive and she gets kind of nerfed down to being a bit of a goldfish and not being very smart. But like, wow, you guys, like, that's cruel. And it happens so suddenly, and it's not really brought up again. It's like, oh wow, okay.
Well, Alexandra, she did want to come back. But she wanted to be a heel, and they don't ever bring her back. They don't let her be a heel. I actually did a video about how I would turn Victoria Winters heel, where you'd have the Leviathan arc going on, and who was it? Paul Stoddard, who's played by Dennis Patrick. They're in the house, they're arguing, and Elizabeth wants him to leave, and she sort of turns her back, and she's like facing the window. They're in the drawing room, and he's standing there like, Liz, I don't look, I'm sorry for what I did. And she's like, I don't want to hear it. And she's wanting him to leave, and all of a sudden you hear the doors open, and the drawing room doors are open, but someone comes in the door. You don't see it right away, and then you hear, I think Elizabeth's right, you should leave. And then you turn, and there's Alexander standing there.
Picture that, honestly.
And she's like, Vicky, you're back. And they sort of hug. And Elizabeth says, I missed you. And she goes, oh, I missed you too. And she kissed her on the cheek. I missed you so much. And you hear click. And she goes, I missed you so much, Mother. And then she steps back, and you see the knife in Liz's stomach. That, to me, would be the most shocking
Joan Bennett
heel turn ever.
Well, that's kind of like, that kind of touches on something which I think is a shame. I think that one of the big downsides of the show kind of going full on daytime horror movie is that they do kind of lose out on a lot of the character drama, and some of it, like, and I did mention earlier that like, oh, the characters in the modern day get kind of nerfed down. It didn't have to be there. There's moments after the 1795 where there's signs of like there being conflict, and they just don't really follow up on it because, hey, we have a vampire, we need to like have spectacle, we need to spend time on the spectacle to get people to watch. So we can't focus on like drama between Cassandra and Elizabeth and Roger suddenly marrying this woman. There's like one scene where they shout about it and it's great, and then it's never brought up again.
It's dismissive because you have Barnabas, who's, and this is what I find funny too. Here's Julia, here's the doctor. Goodness, not Woodard, but the other guy.
Fuck, what's his name? Can I swear? I know who you're talking about. I just can't remember his name. The guy who makes the Frankenstein monster and has the annoying tape recording.
Right. You have. They believe in vampires. They believe in Barnabas as a vampire. But when he's telling them about the witch, telling both of them, they don't believe him. And it's like, wait a second. You just knew about him. Yeah. What's the difference?
So, guy who can bite people, maybe is able to turn into a bat, can make dogs howl just by his very presence, has like vague brainwashing powers, maybe. And no, but the witch is too far. Okay, well, I mean, he came from somewhere. Why would he be lying about this?
Right. It's like
he was born like that.
Now, my favorite line, and one of my favorite characters, Professor Stokes. I love Sarah David's Professor Stokes. I love how that when he asked for the medallion to protect from witchcraft, and he goes, "Do you have the medallion?" He goes, "I'll show you the medallion when you show me the witch." I love the line.
Yes. Okay.
Oh goodness. Who's your top characters?
God, it's such like mine are so basic. It's the ones who you expect. It's going to be Barnabas, Julia, Angelique. Angelique may be my favorite. I don't know. I have a lot of affection for Lara Parker, regardless of how like complex the character is on screen or not. Generally, she's not, but I'm kind of okay with it because Lara Parker is just such a great presence, and she's got those eyes.
Yep.
Like she's just beautiful, and like it's just amazing.
What were your thoughts on Parallel Time?
I've only watched a little bit of Parallel Time, and I think I watched a bit of it, and then eventually I started hitting the bit where the actor started leaving to film House of Dark Shadows, and I started watching it towards a bit in the middle of that where like there's like the Dr. Frankenstein, not the Dr. Frankenstein, the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde storyline, and the other storyline, not the Rebecca one, but like stuff with Angelique, which is part of the Rebecca one, but you know what I mean. And eventually, like, I'm a little bored with this, so I kind of stopped. I'm not really familiar with it. I find the whole Parallel Time thing really odd because I mean, this is kind of indicative of it coming from the time period that it's from. Like, usually when people do like alternate history, usually it's just like a one-off episode of like a TV show. It's usually like, oh, because you weren't born, this happened, or if someone made this different choice, all this stuff. That's not the case with Parallel Time. Parallel Time, everyone's different. Everyone's related to someone else. There's a member of the family who doesn't even exist in our main time stream. Because Quentin's not like Elizabeth and Roger's brother, for example. There's like Angelique's not like related to Professor Stokes, etc., etc. It's very strange if you just watch it. It's like it's never really explained. You just kind of have to go with it.
I love how we get Laura Parker playing twins. Alexis.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that like if you're gonna do a spin on Rebecca, introducing like her twin to come, and also become like be like another reminder of your Mrs. De Winter stand-in, and also for her to also deal with like the shadow of her twin.
Yeah,
that's great. I mean, that's not exactly what they do with it, but it's still really fun.
Who's your favorite ghost? Do you have a favorite ghost?
Oh goodness. I want to say Sarah, but the actor is so hit and miss. I still have like an affection for her just because it's like, I just think it's kind of cute, like her just kind of mysteriously appearing and disappearing. So Sarah, what are some of the other ghosts? What are some like? I mean, Josette's ghost is the other one, but like, I haven't really seen anything where her ghost shows up because she's much more. I mean, I'm sure she shows up afterwards, but she's much more present in pre-Barnabas stuff with like. So I don't really know.
When you watch this from the beginning, there's moments when Josette shows up, when her ghost shows up. The portrait scene where she comes out is amazing. And I love the fact that Barnabas isn't the first person who knows Josette. The Phoenix is.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Phoenix, you meet somebody who knew Josette when you meet the Phoenix in the beginning episodes, which is really, it's interesting. And then you meet, one of my favorite lines from Barnabas is that gave me a telltale of their intimacy was when Barnabas comes out of the coffin and him and David are standing in the old house and they're standing in front of Josette's portrait and David is telling him, if you are Colin, she'll protect you and stuff. And then when he's standing there, he says, I was a Collins. Where were you when I was turned into something my father loathed? And I'm like, oh my God, like, holy shit.
I mean, it doesn't make a ton of sense once you know what they because they retcon the story, but it's a great moment in the moment, I suppose. Because I mean, it's a constant state of retconning, and like the 1795 retcon is a great retcon, so it's not like me complaining. To be clear, it's
right. But I think that's like when I watched that, it let me know, like, wait a minute, they knew one another. They actually, he knew her while she was alive too. So it's like, my God, I was just blown away by that moment. Like, you know what I mean?
I'm sure it's been a while. I think I may have missed that. I think I skipped over that episode in my rewatch this year for whatever reason. But I think I've seen it in the past, so I remember what you're talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you watch it on Tubi or do you own the Coffin box set?
Oh, I wish I had the Coffin box set because it looks amazing, but I can't really afford that kind of luxury. But so I mostly just watch it through Amazon. I have to deal with ads, which are very annoying and oftentimes don't line up with the proper ad breaks, which makes it even more annoying. But it's fine. I live with it.
If you like, Tubi's sort of the same way. Like for people who have it, like they know what I'm talking about. Like Tubi has like the beginning Dark Shadows episodes and like but if you with Tubi you have to type in Dark Shadows at the beginning. Like if you start there, or if you start where the Barnabas Collins arc begins, it's you type in Dark Shadows and you'll see a picture of Jonathan Fred with the fence. But so it's real interesting how Tubi does it. Now I don't watch it on Tubi. I do own the Coffin box set. I've owned it for a while, but it's fun to like watch it and just rewatch it. You know what I mean? It's a lot of fun. What's your favorite music score? Do you have a favorite theme from Dark Shadows?
I don't know the names of the music very well, but like I do think like the two things that first come to mind are like Angelique's theme, like the theremin. Wow. Yeah. I was very off key, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That's always fun. It's like a really easily noticeable. And then also like this is a weird one, but like the opening music for each episode when there's like the narration. I love the narration. I think they don't always like land very well, but like I love like the idea of opening an episode with this mysterious voiceover by an actor in talking about things in really vague melodramatic ways. It sets the tone really well, and the music's a big part of that too. So that, and then so those are probably my top two.
I love the opening theme, right? The Dark Shadows theme, the main theme. And one of I think my favorite, other than Quentin's theme, is Sarah's. I love Sarah's London Bridge. I know it's just London Bridges. I just love it. But yeah, Quentin's theme is definitely, because to me, like when you hear Josette's theme, it fits her. But when you hear Quentin's theme, it fits him too. Like they really, when they came up with a character theme, they really nailed the character.
And they even released the Quentin's theme on a record, which is like I had to explain that while I was watching with my friend. I had to be like, the reason why there's this weird dream sequence is because the music that's playing in it was just released as at the time released as a record, and they're basically advertising it, and that's why there's this long scene of him dancing with I want to say he's dancing with Charity Trask, but I don't think that's who it was.
Where he's saying, "I want to dance with you." Is that?
There's several like dream sequences in the show, so I don't and in that era, so I don't remember which one it is.
if he's singing "I Want to Dance with You," it is with Charity because he turns into the wolf, and it is a dream sequence where he disappears, and she goes Quentin, and she hears the growling, and there's the werewolf.
There's a great dream sequence in 1997, and I keep trying. I need to figure out what episode it is because I want to rewatch it. It's another Charity Trask one where she dreams that she's marrying Death, and like Angelique is there.
Oh wow!
It's one of the very first, and I don't remember which episode it's in, but I just remember being like, oh, this is actually really good. This isn't just fun. This is like actually really creepy. This is creepy.
Is there anything you want to
add to the show?
Yeah.
Geez, I mean, I think that Big Finish is doing some really great stuff with their audio plays. I'm gleaning that the current plan seems to be based off of where things were left off in the last multicast audio, is that they're going to be slowly start to drift away from doing stuff with the original cast just to focus on their new characters, which I mean, I'm okay with. I love the original characters, but I think that it's a soap opera. If they want to keep this going for an extended period, they do need to move on onto other characters. I also think that some of the characters, as much as I love them, don't really necessarily contribute much. They kind of wrote out Barnabas and Julia in the latest one from a few years back. At least so they can't bring them back for more audios because it's a whole thing. I don't want to get into it. It'd be spoilers and it would take too long to explain. Yeah, I think that like if I were to add anything, I mean, nothing off the top of my head. I think that there are certain things that, like, if I were to remake it, that I would do. I mean, I think every fan has like their ideas of well, if I were to remake it, this is what I would do. I think that there's at least more than one fan fiction online as someone who is actually like writing out what they would do with it. There's one fan fiction done it. I know that for certain. But yeah, I'm trying to think. What would I add? I don't think I would add anything really. I think that like I would love to like have seen the characters in the modern day actually get a bit more conflict. Everything all right?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm sorry.
All right, all good. Yeah. So.
But yeah, I think it's right. There are a lot of fan fiction stuff out there, and there's the Big Finish. It's out there. I think all fans should have. And that's sort of the importance of this channel, that I want fans to know they can come on and give their opinion. So I want to thank you for your time.
It's been fun.
For coming on and giving me your time. So thank you so much. It was really nice having you on. Thank you.
Thank you. Of course. It was a pleasure to be here.
It was a lot of fun. At D Mandy on Twitter. Go give him a follow, guys.
And just to be clear, it's at DMANADY.
Right.
That is the second A in there. People miss it though, quite frequently. You'd be surprised. No, like even on proper like official documents, people somehow just don't miss it. It's very strange.
Twitter can be weird too, because there's times like where like I'll look somebody up I know I'm following, but so many names like pop up at once when you're like typing somebody in.
Yeah, it's hard sometimes. But yeah, so I'm at DMANADY on Twitter. My main fandom is Doctor Who. Every year around this time, I will start watching Dark Shadows, and I will start tweeting about it very frequently. Other than that, though, it's mostly Doctor Who, me whining about real life, and yeah. So if you want to hear a 23-year-old complain about stuff, there you have it.
It's all good, man. Thank you so much, man, David, for coming on and joining me. I really enjoyed having you on. I'm going to have to bring you back on sometime.
Sure.
Just go give him a follow, guys, on Twitter, at DMandy. So, have a good night, man.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.